Chip.
Oh, good.
We got Chip, and then and Warren Davidson is our subcommittee chairman for housing. So he will be here as well. He's a co-sponsor of January here.
Hey, Jen,
Hi.
how are you?
I'm good, and yourself?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm introducing you. So
Oh, good. Okay, great.
I'm right before you.
Oh, good.
And so your last name is Van Dyke.
Done. Just scratch that for you and we got top.
Van Dyke.
And
It's okay. I spoke German when I was a kid. I lived in Germany for a little while. So.
Oh, very good.
all right.
Yes.
Okay, we got.
Another beautiful day.
Oh,
I mean,
God.
we need to have these press
Yes,
conferences.
we do.
more.
We do.
Adriana said to say hi. I don't know if
Oh,
you've never heard
yes.
from. Yes.
Hello. All right, Dee, come on up here. Brian, come on up. Oh, just right here. We got to get Chip up here.
Woo.
Um, you know, the dignity. Hey, Chip. How are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, you've been a stalwart on this.
Yes.
And
All the
Warren
speakers
Davidson
need to
is
be
a
up.
co-sponsor, and he's our chairman of the housing subcommittee, so
Drew,
he should be on.
we need up here. Can you make Elaine? Are you taking pictures?
Well, let's see.
Yeah, perfect.
First, check the backpack. Thanks.
You're third. So Michelle, Margaret, Chip.
Cell phones off, folks?
Oh, good.
Yep.
Cell phones off.
Are you okay standing, Andy? You can sit down if you. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we ready?
Yeah,
Tyler,
let's
get
do it.
yourself in front here so we. Then Brian, get yourself so we can see you.
Oops, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I get out here on the edge.
Okay, we ready? Welcome. We're so glad. Is this working? Sound is working? Yep. Okay. Welcome. We're so glad to have you here. My name is Michelle Steeb. I'm a senior fellow with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, overseeing their initiative to transform homelessness policy. A policy that's failed our country, that's failed communities across the country, and most notably, it's failed the homeless. I speak today not only from the policy perspective, but from the perspective of someone who served on the front lines of homelessness, running one of Northern California's largest programs for homeless women and children. 10 years ago, HUD institutionalized a one-size-fits-all approach to homelessness called Housing First. This massive experiment wholly defunded services such as mental health counseling, drug and alcohol counseling, and employment training. They also defunded congregate shelter to instead fund housing vouchers only. These are housing vouchers with no requirements, such as sobriety, such as work, ever. As you'll see in the folders we've distributed, and if someone could hand out the folders here, I'd appreciate it. President Obama promised that this one-size-fits-all approach would end homelessness in a decade. 10 years later, we stand here today. The number of homeless Americans has instead soared, and the climb began well before the pandemic. HUD data reveals that despite a 200% increase in spending and a 47% increase in the number of permanent housing vouchers, the number of Americans who became homeless soared by 16% and by almost 21% in the unsheltered population. This failed promise also resulted in lethal consequences for the homeless. Fatalities rose by 77% across the major counties in the country, by 93% in Sacramento, which is where my family called home for so many years. Please join me in a moment of silence for the thousands, tens of thousands of people who have perished under this promise. Thank you. The Biden administration recently launched a new homelessness plan. They call it All In. It requests a doubling down on the same failed experiment. The plan remains unsurprisingly silent on the failure of the old plan, also referenced in the folders that hopefully someone's handing out to you. Today you'll hear from policymakers, You'll hear from nonprofit leaders and from people who have successfully overcome homelessness. They will address the policy failure from their individual perspectives, but they'll also address the changes that must be made to restore the lives of human beings struggling with homelessness and to restore cities throughout America being crushed under its weight. On behalf of TPPF, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for being here. It's now my pleasure to introduce my friend and my colleague, Dr. Robert Marbert.
Housing First just has not worked. It's been a failure. We should have been celebrating, if their promise had been kept, the end of homelessness. And it was a promise made 10 years ago that homelessness would be done, completely finished, all groups by this year. It has totally failed. And it failed because it was illogically set up. As soon as you take away treatment requirements, job training requirements, as soon as you stop promoting recovery, there's no way you'll ever exit homelessness. I know of no single person ever to recover out of homeless because they got a voucher only. And what happened in 2013, by stripping out the requirements, we basically made Section 8 vouchers with no rules. And we took away any treatment, any recovery, and it's no wonder homelessness has skyrocketed. Deaths have skyrocketed, and now you have the meth and fentanyl crisis and the local level crime crisis all commingling in. And unless you bring back the requirements, unless you bring back treatment, unless you bring back the focus on recovery to get out of homelessness forever, it is not going to work. And I just have to applaud Congressman Barr. He's been leading this for 11 years, and his Housing Plus Act is the most substantive change that can make a change that has ever occurred in this area. And I just have to say he's been a champion this a long time, but now it's actually getting traction. So, and thank the other co-sponsors, and I'm going to turn it over to Congressman Chip Roy now. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. It's great to be here. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having the Texas Public Policy Foundation's leadership. Thanks for what you guys are doing. I used to work at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, so it's near and dear to my heart. But it's also, as a Texan and went to the University of Virginia, I'm great beer with my University of Virginia mate here, Andy Barr, and January, who lives in Virginia. And so we've got a good Virginia connection, too. Of course, it goes back to Texas, doesn't it? But look, I'm here because, I get a little tired of, frankly, some of my conservative colleagues forgetting that one of the key parts to being a conservative isn't just focusing on individual responsibility, personal responsibility, and how you can excel and prosper on your own merit, which is critical and core to our beliefs, but also our belief in our faith in community, and how community is so critically important to have civil society be there for all of us, and how we lift each other up. That's how we actually solve problems. That's what I believe as a conservative. And I think this is such a critical and core component to that. And I want to applaud Andy. I'm a warm-up act here. I mean, Andy's been leading on this, the Housing Plus Act, which I'm a proud co-sponsor of and have been since I've been in Congress. That's how you actually solve the problem. The federal government always likes to come in with these top-down solutions. They think just throwing checks and throwing money is going to solve the problem, and it doesn't. And people who have experienced it, they know it. In Austin, what works? Places like Community First, places where you have people there with a heart and with resources, but with the ability to work with people to deal with the issues that are actually driving the problem: drug addiction, mental illness, dealing with their overall well-being. The Housing First agenda has failed. And look, we're seeing that play out in Austin, just not at the federal level, right? The local level, they're making bad decisions. I mean, in Austin, we've had 4,500 homeless people currently living in Austin, up from 3,000 in 2020. Despite $225 million spent in 2022 to combat homelessness in Austin, we're going to have 1,000 children living in cars in 2023. In 2022, a record 296 homeless people died in the streets of Austin. Austin is becoming one of the worst places for homelessness, and it's a direct consequence of the failed policies of the city council in Austin pursuing the same kinds of policies that we're seeing currently out of the administration that is all focused on housing first rather than the more holistic approach, which matches up people who want to help with people who need the help in a way that addresses the root causes and the concerns. So I can't thank everybody standing behind me enough for being willing to stand up and be an advocate here. But there's no real point to what we do if at the end of the day we don't have results and we don't create policies that allow the entire boat to be lifted of our overall American economy and prosperity and economic growth, but that we're not allowing people to get left behind, that we're not not doing what we're supposed to do. I'll say as a Christian that we're called to do, which is ensure the people who need help are getting help. And just writing a check not only doesn't provide the help, it actually makes it worse. It does. It actually makes it worse. So we're here to actually solve these problems. I'm proud to stand next to Andy Barr, but I'm going to turn it over to January, who's the real hero here among us, and glad to meet her.
Hello, my name is January Coates, and at 19 years old, I, like many youth in our economy, has found ourselves homeless. At that time, I found Thurman Brisbane Homeless Shelter, which is in the state of Virginia. They were able to not only help me with getting my GED, help me sustain a car and sustain housing. I now serve on that same board. One of the things that I've learned in serving on the board of directors is that Housing First not only does not work, it leaves our residents feeling like they can just continue to be a churn. Every 90 days, every 120 days, they're coming back. Where our mantra is, we'd like to have wraparound services. We'd like to continue to offer mental stability. We'd like to offer daycare, and we'd like to take that money that is being afforded for the wrong purposes and allocate that money so that we can teach job training, so that we can make sure that people in our society know and understand that they could be like myself, which was once homeless, and now I own 3 real estate franchises. I own my own real estate school, and I run a nonprofit that last year alone I gave away 1 million pounds of food to the DMV area. Thank you. So not only am I stating the things that I'm saying, but every Sunday my nonprofit is in these streets with the people that we are talking about today, with the constituents that represent many of our communities that don't have the necessities that they need to get to where they need to be. And I'm sorry, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
And I'd like to introduce Congresswoman Van Dyne.
Great job. I mean, aren't those uplifting stories? Don't you just, we come here, we have concerns, we express our concerns, but actually showing someone who has come out of it and how she came out of it. And congratulations. I really appreciate you being here with us today. I had the honor of serving under the Trump administration as a Southwest Regional Administrator for HUD under Secretary Ben Carson. And Secretary Carson's vision for HUD offered such a strong agenda for entitlement reform, and one that was centered around better outcomes for American people. One of the things that I really appreciated about Secretary Carson is when I decided that I was not going to run again for mayor of the city of Irving, but I was going to go work for him, was that he recognized the need for change in the narrative at HUD. He wanted to define success not by the number of people that we get into HUD programs, but by the number of people that we graduate out of HUD programs. Would anyone allow a school to judge its success by the number of students enrolled? Or rather the graduation rate? Of course not. I mean, common sense tells us that success is when we help people out of poverty, not to trap them in it. We help lift people out by offering job training and financial literacy classes, tools that end the cycle of government dependence rather than enabling it. And similarly, my colleagues and I recently passed legislation to require work requirements for entitlement programs, and this will help lift Americans out of poverty. Part of Secretary Carson's goals was to create Envision centers, which concentrated federal resources into low-income areas and created a one-stop shop for people to learn about job opportunities, to get job training and other types of education and access to health care and benefit from mentorships. The idea was to put them in a situation where they could help themselves and have all the resources at at hand to do that. We found that Envision Centers were a great way to help people become more self-sufficient and self-reliant. And any serious solution to homelessness must involve education, job training, and opportunities for mentorship. What we found is under the Biden administration, all of those programs were killed. They were not even pursued, even though they were doing such great jobs in our communities. Our vision at HUD helped connect people with job opportunities and arm them with the tools that they needed to be chosen for jobs. And now as a member of Congress, I've kept those same priorities in mind. In my first year, I hosted a North Texas job fair where we brought together hundreds of employers and people looking for jobs in one place. We can continue to help people through events like this where we bring them together. We connect them with meaningful opportunities to move up in the world, and we offer them the resources that they need to succeed. Another problem that we tackled was ending the Obama-era approach, which focused more on identity politics than on helping improve the community. Obama's failed program divided people based on race and did far more harm than good. And unfortunately, the Biden administration is doubling down, as you heard, and they've chosen to bring back this program and repeat the mistakes of the Obama era. I'm very glad that we're here today. I really want to give a thank and a shout out to Andy Barr for all the work that he has done for all these years. I am excited to work with this Congress. I'm excited to work with everybody here. There are tools that work. We have to give them a chance. Thank you. And who am I introducing? Oh, and I'm here to introduce Sergeant McGinnis. Mac Angus. McGinnis. Mac Angus. Thank you. Maybe
Good afternoon again. Thank you all for being here. I'm Sergeant Drew McAngus out of Austin, Texas. I'm with Travis County Constable Precinct 3. With over 40 years of enforcement, being involved with the criminal justice system, 6.5 years ago, I was asked to create a constable outreach program. I was given the task to try to come up with answers and come up with ways to help our people who are experiencing homelessness on the streets. I'm in homeless camps on a daily basis. I go in, I try to build relationships by constant interaction with those out in the streets, in the woods, in the cars, or wherever I find them. I attempt to get these individuals connected to whatever services are available because I understand that not one size fits all. Many of my people that I deal with on a daily basis are addicted to alcohol, drugs, sex, criminality, the whole types of things that go on that I see on a daily basis. I will tell you there is a large percentage of my people who suffer from mental illness that are out on the street. In 1983, I started the first mental health unit in the state of Texas and have extensive training in that. And I'll tell you, the problem I see in Austin is the addictive behavior and the mental health issues. And these people need help, and that's what we're there for. I've come to realize that housing first by itself does not cure homelessness in any way, shape, or form. One size does not fit all. Most of my individuals on the street battle the addiction and the mental illness, and I believe that to successfully help these individuals, there needs to be housing plus. For example, drug treatment, rehabilitation, mental health care and services. We need to teach the individuals on the street how to live and operate independently and to teach job skills to become self-sufficient. Each individual I deal with has their own personal challenges that prevent them from overcoming their situations. We need to be looking at the homeless population not as a group, but as individuals out there that needs our help. I, too, am very supportive of this legislation being introduced. We need to change the way we've been doing things the last 10 years because clearly it's not working. In Austin, our population has significantly exploded, and I'm seeing more and more on a daily basis. I thank each one of y'all for your participation in this and support. And just to give you the example of kind of the work that I do, your next speaker has become a very close friend of mine. I found him in the homeless camp several years ago. He's now one of the best success stories I could ever get. And I want to introduce you to Tyler Wing.
Jeez. I was once homeless for the better part of about 5 years, and at one time I was a run and gun news reporter just like y'all, and my last station was in New Orleans, But after giving that up to move on, I moved to Austin to help raise my newborn son, and I ran into a brick wall. I was in a new city, trying to start a new career, being a new dad, not knowing anyone. I kind of lost it. I don't know. And in just a few short months, I went from being that lead story news reporter, ABC affiliate, WGNO New Orleans, to living under a bridge in South Austin, homeless, strung out on meth. It was pretty remarkable. But suddenly, life spun out of control, and all of a sudden I'm committing crimes. I'm dumpster diving. My camp burned down. My car got stolen, and I'm suffering from this addiction. And I'd pretty much thrown in the towel. And then Sergeant Drew starts coming around with his food and his water and his hope and his encouragement that I could do better. And he was also willing to help me any way he could. And here's just a little insight of what I've observed with my friends who got the housing. It didn't make them better. All it did was give them pretty much a mini vacation, a place for all the other friends to come over and shower, a place to do their drugs, and scare the living hell out of the people who actually paid rent there. I felt so bad for them. And after the time is up, without having their employment figured out, or their addiction figured out, or their mental disability, or whatever it may be, there they are back on the street corner flying a sign, just trying to get enough change to get high. Now, I thank God for Sergeant Drew McAngus. Sorry, buddy. He gave me the attention. He instilled hope, my self-worth, reminding me who I was and who I could be, all on back on the path to self-sufficiency. But my story is different, and everyone's of the homeless people out there, their story is different from the next. And if we're going to even make a dent in this homeless population, it's going to take work. Plain and simple. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take the programs, and like you said, matching the people with the programs and the people who want help. It's going to take patience with an individual to figure out the course of action to help them best. Now, what's being proposed here, Housing Plus, is the first government policy that I've ever read that makes any sense. It helps, not enables, and it's different from the same old, and maybe just revolutionary enough to help change lives. Up next, we have the remarkable, the amazing Andy Bales with the latest on LA's Skid Row.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Congressman Andy Barr, and all who invited me. I'm in the epicenter of homelessness. LA is the capital of homelessness. Unfortunately, our most accurate collective barometer for failure is our death rate. We're losing 6 people per day in LA County to complications of homelessness, and by far the leading cause is overdose by fentanyl. And California is the only state that doubled down completely on the housing first, harm reduction policy, and street homelessness has skyrocketed to the point that California represents about 1/4 of the homelessness, the street homelessness in all of our country. That's how badly the housing first, harm reduction policy has failed. It's been a direct impact on Union Rescue Mission. We focus on recovery, and we focus on change lives like January, and 25% of our staff are former guests who've had their lives turned around. That's our barometer for success. But around us, 50% of the permanent supportive housing on Skid Row is vacant because cartel-backed gangs have taken them over. And if you've seen the news lately, Skid Row Housing Trust collapsed under the weight of that, left 29 buildings behind and 1,500 people stuck in housing now under a receivership that is also failing to address the needs of its guests. So think about the difference. Focused on recovery over capacity. Focused on harm reduction and the free flow of hard drugs. I'm talking hard drugs. It was meth, then it was meth mixed with fentanyl, then it now is meth mixed with fentanyl mixed with tranquilizer, horse tranquilizer, that makes Narcan ineffective at reversing overdose, and that's why we're losing 6 people per day to overdose deaths and traffic and murder. Murders of homeless people in LA are up 47% over last year. If any of you come, I can't believe that you wouldn't declare a human rights disaster on the streets of Skid Row, and I lay it at the hands of the harm reduction policy. It is absolutely unsustainable. It takes too long to build these units, and once they're built, and too slow, too expensive, and once they're built, there's a free flow of hard drugs. And the only thing we're sustaining, only thing our policies are currently sustaining, are cartels. We are subsidizing and sustaining and supporting cartels with our current policies. It's time for a move of at least those who want recovery to receive recovery under the Housing Plus Act. So thank you, Congressman Andy Barr, and I'll ask you to come on up.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Thank you all for being here. My name is Andy Barr. I'm the representative from Central Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky. I appreciate everyone here today to discuss this important topic of the homelessness epidemic that we are experiencing in our country today. I want to thank my colleagues, Chip Roy, Beth Van Dyne, also Warren Davidson from Ohio, who is a co-sponsor of this legislation. He's the chairman of the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee, and he will be shepherding this legislation through the Financial Services Committee with me. And I want to tell you a little bit about this bill. But before I do that, I want to thank Andy Bales. I want to thank Dr. Robert Marbut. I want to thank the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I want to thank Sergeant Drew for your compassion and your care for your fellow human being. But most of all, I want to thank January for her courage to tell her personal story of overcoming homelessness, and also Tyler and your journey and sharing that. And what I want to just say first and foremost is about why we're doing this. It's not because we're worried about the expense of homelessness, and no doubt it's a huge expense. It's not because we see this as a liability on our society. It's because we see January and we see Tyler as assets. They are assets, not liabilities. And every homeless person in this country, struggling with addiction, struggling in mental health crisis, struggling with a lack of job skills, they have potential. We believe in these people, and we know that they are being failed by Housing First, because Housing First dehumanizes them. And it says that they are not worthy and that we're going to warehouse them and not meet them where they are. That has failed America's homeless population year in and year out. And we are here today to declare for these assets, these human beings, no more Housing First. Housing First is a failed policy, and they deserve better. And so let me tell you a little bit about what we think about how to reform this problem. Homelessness is an issue that has plagued too many Americans for far too long. It's become painfully evident that simply housing the victims of homelessness has not effectively addressed the problem. After a roughly 31% decrease in homelessness in the 7 years prior to Housing First being implemented, the Obama administration spent substantially more money and saw more than a 20% increase in unsheltered homelessness. As evidenced by this, the one-size-fits-all simply does not and will not work. There has been a 77% increase in the number of homeless fatalities under the Housing First policy and a 131% increase in Washington, D.C. The homeless in this country need to be supported and encouraged so that they can get back on their own 2 feet. We can provide access to the long-awaited care that they so desperately need. But to do this, we must take a comprehensive approach to solve this issue, taking the afflicted off the streets and tackling the underlying causes of homelessness, such as mental illness, addiction, and a lack of job skills. Many transitional housing facilities in my district do not qualify for federal funds because they require participation in wraparound services such as counseling, financial education, or career development as a condition of continued residency, or they mandate sobriety for the residents. These requirements are necessary and effective in many cases, including for individuals recovering from addiction. These facilities have a track record of successfully transitioning individuals out of homelessness and towards self-sufficiency, but they can't access federal funds. I want to tell you a quick story about a constituent of mine, a woman who found herself in a terrible cycle of addiction, and she resorted to prostitution to feed her addiction. And she ended up in a women's shelter that was categorically ineligible for federal assistance because the women's shelter required the residents to be sober. And when the federal government implemented Housing First, they told this shelter that they could no longer drug test the residents if they wanted to get the federal funds. And this woman, my constituent, who was in recovery with tears in her eyes, told me, begged me, please don't make them put someone in active addiction in the bedroom next to me. I will fail. I need a sober place to live. I need support. This is what Housing First does. It forces people into situations where they will not succeed. And that is unacceptable. And that's why I'm introducing the Housing Promotes Livelihood and Ultimate Success Act, or the Housing Plus Act, to give communities additional tools to keep people in permanent housing and finally end homelessness in America. This legislation would prohibit the HUD Secretary from prohibiting, limiting, or otherwise restricting the award of Continuum of Care funds, or COC funds, to providers because they require wraparound services or because they are faith-based organizations. This bill would also direct the Secretary to allocate no less than 30% of COC funding to recipients who provide or facilitate access to wraparound services. The exclusive reliance on the Housing First model is not the answer. It's an all of the above approach is the answer. And my bill will put us on the right path, enlarging the universe of eligible organizations, including not-for-profit and faith-based organizations that have a proven record of success in transitioning people out of homelessness, out of poverty, and into permanent non-subsidized housing, self-sufficiency, and upward mobility. I want to thank the Texas Public Policy Foundation for supporting my bill and raising the profile of this important issue, Dr. Robert Marbut, who has been a champion of advocating for this reform. You have been great partners in this effort. Michelle Steeb, Senior Fellow at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and a champion of reforming Texas's homelessness policy. And I want to extend thanks to our guests for their testimony on why this legislative effort is so necessary. And at this time, I want to invite my constituent, Bruce Nickel, B. Nickel, an affordable housing developer in Lexington, Kentucky, to talk a little bit about why this policy reform is so important from the perspective of a landlord and as a developer of affordable housing. And if we're going to get more affordable housing in this country, why Housing Plus is the answer. B?
Thank you. All right. Thank you all very much. My name is B. Nickel. I'm from Lexington, Kentucky, and I'm a provider of affordable housing and mixed-use development in our community. And being asked to come here today has given me the opportunity to talk about one of the organizations that I work with. The Chrysalis House is a women's recovery program in Lexington, Kentucky, that provides wraparound and supportive services for women and children in recovery. through my experience with them, I have found that the best tenants that we can get in the affordable housing business are the tenants that are provided with wraparound services. If we have somebody walking with these tenants to help them be successful and help them overcome their challenges, that creates a better tenant. And better tenants reduce turns of units and reduce vacancy rates. So it's important for the affordable housing developers to no longer prohibit providers who prohibit advisors, or excuse me, it's getting confusing here. What this bill does is it prohibits HUD from prohibiting servicers who require wraparound services to use their funds. So that's a not very clear way of saying that it's very important for affordable housing developers to have tenants that are participating in some sort of wraparound program. So from this limited perspective, I'd like to say I am a supporter of Congressman Barr's legislation, and I hope you all are too. Thank you.
Thank you, B. Appreciate it. Thank you. And I want to also thank Brian Sunderland, the Executive Director of the Cicero Institute, for joining us today and advocating for this important reform. And I'd also like to hear from now Brian Borelli, who will speak to us about his experience of overcoming homelessness through Open Door Mission. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Borelli. I'm from Rochester, New York, and it's only by the grace of God that I'm standing here. See, 9 years ago, over 2 decades of drug and alcohol struggles and abuse, and dealing with depression, anxiety, overwhelmed with resentments, culminated into becoming homeless, burning all of my bridges, wearing out all of my welcomes, and having no place to really call home. And that just brings about despair and hopelessness. And it's only because of the Open Door Mission in Rochester, New York, and their long-term faith-based Christian life recovery program that I was able to get a place to stay. Yeah, that's important. But it was all day, full-time, 7 days a week programming where I was just immersed in so many different things, from counseling and 12-step meetings and discipleship, serving, and I spent 13 months doing that. And if it wasn't for that strict, it was very strict, but it was necessary, all of that programming of recovery, I wouldn't be standing here today. Life recovery is only possible with structure and accountability. And if it wasn't for those things in my life and all of the services and resources that were available to me and people pouring into me, pouring out love on me and showing me how to do it, not just handing something to me and saying, go ahead, give it your best shot, have a nice life. I was taken by the hand and shown how to live. To just give somebody who's struggling with addictions or any kind of life struggle, emotional or psychological issues, just giving them a place to stay is only making the problem worse, because homelessness is a result of so many underlying problems that need to be addressed specifically and properly. There are processes and they take time for healing. But ignoring that is just enabling and progressing the problem. And as a recovery ministry leader now, because of all of that I just spoke about, now for almost 3 years I've been leading a faith-based, Christ-centered ministry of recovery at my church. And I've seen the fruit of that when you pour into somebody and you sit down one-on-one and you share your experience and your strength and your hope. That gives them hope. And without hope, there's nothing but despair. And we'll be stuck in the place where we're at. And if nothing changes, then nothing changes. So let's change something.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for your work. Thank you, Brian. And now we'd like to hear from John Ashman, the CEO of Citygate Network, to speak about the role that Citygate members play in restoring dignity and capacity to those struggling with homelessness. Hey, thank you.
Hey, Citygate Network is North America's oldest and largest association of faith-based crisis shelters and life transformation centers. In most U.S. cities, one of our member organizations is the largest homeless service provider. And in some cities, it's the only homeless services provider. You've heard from a couple of people this morning that represent Citygate Network member organizations. But I represent the entire country of places from West Coast, where we've heard, and Andy Bard, or not Andy Barr's here, Andy Bales, the other Andy, is over here. He just got a text. He gets a lot of them. I think California is now up to 50%. Is that? Of the street homeless, 50%. That's a news flash that just came in. But we do East Coast, West Coast, and what we're seeing that you're hearing about in these places is happening all over. But there's cracks happening in this infrastructure that used to be called housing first. And you're hearing it from politicians. You're also hearing it from comedians. Dave Chappelle the other day was in a very famous city. He goes, "What is happening in this city?" And he says, "We need a superhero to come in and fix this place. It's a mess." One of the things that they're leaving out, and that Housing Plus Act is going to talk about, is bringing in the faith-based organizations. I was testifying over in a building right over there a few years back when someone asked, what percent of the work done on the streets is done by faith-based organizations when you're talking about homeless people? And a famous congressman from California said, well, probably 3, 4, 5%. That prompted us to do a survey. We work with Baylor University, and that survey came out and said 60% of the work done on the streets with hungry, homeless, abused, and addicted people is done by faith-based organizations, and that doesn't even count the churches. 2 days ago, I was, where am I here? Right over there, with Salvation Army and Adult and Teen Challenge. Between Salvation Army and Citygate Network, my organization, we have, this is US ICH numbers pre-COVID, 70% of the homeless service beds in America. This is where the faith-based groups come in. And one of the things that the faith-based groups do is, yes, look at spiritual reformation. It doesn't happen in one time like those old rescue missions that you know, where you come through the door and you have to hear somebody telling you you're going to hell one more time before you can have the meatloaf that you're smelling cooking down the hall. That doesn't work that way anymore. What we look at in missions, we have 8 S's, and this is what's so critical about the Housing Plus Act. It understands this. The first S is saved. That's taking the needle away from somebody who's about ready to overdose. The next one is sober, no longer controlled by stimulants or depressants. The next one is stable. That's mental health. The number of people on the streets with mental illness is just off the charts, and we have to address that. The next is schooled. That means you're getting enough education to be competitive. The next is skilled. That means you are learning not just about jobs. Jobs are parking cars, jobs are bussing tables, but helping people with careers. The next is secure. That means I have my own money. I know how to manage it. The next is settled. That means I have my own safe place to return every night. And the last is serving, giving back to the community. That's how we have to embrace this. And those of you who are watching on C-SPAN or one of the major networks, tell your lawmakers they need to look at the Housing Plus Act if they're tired of seeing all of the issues that are going on your streets right now and want to make a difference. This is where it starts, and it starts here. And thanks to Congressman Andy Bard.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Thank you, John, and thank you to everyone here. Michelle, I'm going to wrap up and talk about how we can support it. Representative Davidson here. Is Warren here? I don't see Warren. Is Warren here? Well, Warren, we appreciate Warren Davidson from Ohio as the chairman of the Housing Subcommittee for supporting this legislation. Michelle, you want to say any last thing before I wrap up? Well, let me just say, how do you, if you like what you heard today and you want to help, how do you help? Just recognize the inspiration behind this legislation, and that's Brian, Tyler, and January, who have shown us the way out of poverty, out of homelessness, and into self-sufficiency. They are an inspiration to all of us. And we want every homeless person in America to have the same opportunity to escape homelessness, escape poverty, as these wonderful people are, because again, these are assets and they deserve better than housing first. So I encourage everyone who's watching on TV, call your congressman, call your senator, tell them to co-sponsor the Housing Plus Act. And for those who have representatives or senators who actually say we support housing first, tell them that this legislation expands the universe, that even if you advocate for, and even if you disagree with us and you believe in housing first, why not give a try to another method? Faith-based organizations, not-for-profits who do other different things in addition to just warehousing homeless people and thinking that it's going to fix the problem. Obviously, this is a crisis in our country. Housing first has not worked, so let's try something different. What harm will that do? Let's try something different. Thank you all so much, and thank you for caring about these wonderful people. Thanks so much.
You make the picture. All right.
Andy man claiming to hold top-level secrets about Russian advanced bombers has just turned up at the U.S. southern border, seeking asylum. The man claims to have been an engineer at a production facility over in the city of Kazan, and he says that he possesses top-secret information about the White Swan Tu-160, which is the most advanced bomber in the Russian arsenal. U.S. border officials, they interviewed the man, and they determined that his story was in fact credible and eventually passed him off to the FBI, who are still in the process of interrogating him right now. However, analysts have pointed out that the fact that the story was even leaked to the public is an indication that perhaps the American government is encouraging other Russians who also hold top-level secrets to also escape to America. And if you thought that was interesting, well then you should click on that button below this video and check out Epic TV, one of the best no-censorship video platforms on the internet. On there, you will find awesome programs like American Thought Leaders.
We've now been, for 2 years, trying to obtain the unredacted emails. We're down to the last 50 pages. So that's where all the incriminating evidence is.
Crossroads.
One of the big things happening right now is what's taking place with Russia and China.
Counterpunch.
You will see information you've never seen anywhere else.
Facts Matter. I'm your host, Roman from the Epic Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free. As well as a plethora of great documentaries, wholesome movies that you can enjoy with your whole family.
If I reach 1 hour, I accomplish something.
Cooking programs, and my absolute favorite, programs about traditional art and traditional music, which can honestly uplift your mood and fill you with hope for the future. And the best thing about Epic TV, at least in my opinion, is that there's no corporate backing and there's no allegiance to some anti-American agenda.
How dare you come to this peaceful community and try to scam these people?
What the hell are you talking about?
But rather, it's just good, honest, wholesome content that's based in truth and tradition.
I saw it. It was incredible.
Something that you can actually sit down with your whole family and enjoy, knowing that some ideology is not about to be pushed upon you.
And who's fighting it? We're fighting it here at Epoch Times, and we need to keep bringing you the news.
And so again, if you'd like to check out Epic TV, just click on that button below this video. You and your family will